So first off, I have made myself a rum and grape mother. So give yourself a cheers to start the week off. That tastes like nothing, which is really weird. This rum and grape energy drink, and it tastes like literally nothing. So, the big topic, ladies and gentlemen, the big topic from the last couple of weeks has been everyone's favorite thing, balance. A good friend, Morphologist, and I know for a fact you all know who Morphologist is, because if you don't, that's kind of crazy. You should figure out who Morphologist is. Did a little post on his YouTube, as well as talked a little bit on his stream about things that he wants to happen to the A2. That sparked a massive discussion on Reddit, Twitter, Twitch, literally everywhere. Spectrum probably as well, but I didn't say anything about it. About what should happen to the A2. And it got me thinking about the overarching state of balance, and a balance in a game like Star Citizen. What should happen? How balance should be approached? Should balance even be approached right now? Space Wolf, thank you very much for the 14-month resub. So, with that in mind, I'm going to tell you guys what I sort of think about in terms of balance. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on balance. I'm going to be talking about more than just combat. We're going to be talking about trade. We're going to be talking about mining. We're going to be talking about quite a few things. I'm going to start off with, should we even care about balance at this stage in development? And I have mixed feelings about it. Because on one hand, when things are incredibly unbalanced, people get annoyed with the game. They don't want to play it at all, which means people aren't testing it at all. And so you get into a situation where everything's kind of out of whack and it's kind of pointless. So I do think there should be some development time put into balance even right now. At the same time, it doesn't have to be extremely drastic. It's also very important to remember that there's going to be a large amount of things that change over and over and over again, with new ships being released, with new mechanics being put out, fixes, all that sort of stuff. Lots of things change a ton of times. So that's sort of my feeling in general, is like you should focus. You shouldn't focus. You should do some balancing now, but it shouldn't be incredibly important. And I think for backers, as long as you're able to like enjoy the game, right? As long as the balance is at the point that you can enjoy the game, I don't think it should be super important right now. But there is a level of balancing that you have to do, right? You have to. So let's get into the more specific stuff with everything, all of that in mind. So the A2 is going to be the first thing that we're going to be talking about. And I think a lot of people have put it a lot better than I have, which is that like the A2 doesn't need to be balanced right now, but that doesn't mean it would be a bad thing if they did alter it in one way or another. I do think, from what I've seen for events like Jumptown, the A2, it's a tier 0 ship. It is a ship that is basically a must-have if you're doing Jumptown. It doesn't mean it can't be countered, but you should always have it, and it's a ship that you literally always have to look out for. And that's because we don't have other bombing vehicles currently. So that's pretty important. I did hear that execute, yes. That actually, we will talk about that afterwards, because that kind of has to do with balancing PvP gameplay. So thank you for bringing that up. I'll put that in the back pocket for half an hour from now. So yeah, I think some of the things that people have put forward of, you know, requiring a co-pilot to do bombing, I think is relevant. Some people sort of like push it away. Some people sort of say, well, like that doesn't really change much, but it does. Requiring double the manpower to operate the vehicle does more than you think it does. The power of one A2 being more accurate is currently worse than just having two A2s. You know what I mean? But is it a thing that has to be balanced? No. It would just be nice if it is. And so there's a lot of options for it. PvP is not for soft souls, correct. And then, yeah, it'd be nice if there was other options than just the A2. Because, like I said, right now it's a tier 0 vehicle for things like Jumptown. And that does make the experience worse for a lot of players. 100% Echo Bit, but we are expecting other bombers too. There is still a expectation that we're going to get a MSR variant-ish, like something that's using the MSR hull that will be able to do bombing. And there's no doubt in my mind that we'll get like a retaliated ground bombing module or something. But it's also, once again, is it relevant enough that we make these things right now? Probably not. Probably the balancing required for that isn't necessarily a thing that has to happen right now. And when we're talking about combat balancing as well, one thing that comes up a lot is like the fighter meta, right? So I'm not super in with the PvP crowd, so I don't know exactly what the meta comprises specifically of right now, but I know there's always a lot of complaints coming around about, you know, this ship is tier 1, this ship's tier 1, whatever. And I think that's another thing that doesn't matter as often. Execute, there was some leaks that happened, I think it was early last year, but it was very, very, like, rumor-ish. I don't remember exactly where I heard it from. So, yeah, like, people talking about, like, the fighter meta, and I don't think the fighter meta is necessarily a thing that matters that much right now as well. The Star Bomber, yeah. It's all right, whatever. The main point is that other bombers are expected in the future. But yeah, so the fighter meta becomes a thing a lot that happens. I will say, there's something that Mikhail from chat has actually sort of pushed me on, which is that medium fighters are just garbage and do literally nothing and are kind of pointless right now. And so that's kind of lame because you have this whole type of ship that is just not worth using even in PvE, because you can kind of excuse balancing when, like, at least they're good at something, or at least they're okay at something, and medium fighters are just actual trash. They are actual proper garbage, and they have lots of issues and stuff. So rebalancing for that sort of purpose might be worth doing right now, because otherwise you're invalidating an entire ship type. So that's something that, yeah, balance right now would probably be worth doing. Make medium fighters something. The Ares. And Aimless will hate me. Nah. The Ares, the big thing balance-wise, the Ares. And I'm not talking about how, like, the cannon feels like a repeat or anything like that. Actual balance-wise with the Ares, as long as it can hit large ships hard, it is doing its job. I wouldn't say it's necessarily doing its job right now, so that's a problem, right? I don't care about accuracy. I don't care about anything. As long as it is hitting large ships hard, I think that is fine. But there are other issues that people have with it. One thing I'll mention that Aimless brings up a lot when we're talking about the Ares, and like it is a fair thing, is like, well, when they advertise the vehicle, they talk about it, you know, being able to kill, you know, these. No, it should be able to kill like small ships pretty easily or whatever. But gameplay balance-wise, that shouldn't. Because you have to be able to gameplay balance that. But once again, is that a thing you balance now, or is that a thing you balance later? Well, it needs to be able to at least kill big ships now, and it should be the Hammerhead up, in my opinion. Anything Hammerhead size or up. And I think the Hercules, the Carrack, the Reclaimer, although who the hell's using a Reclaimer? I think those should be used. Should be able to be killed by the Ares right now, and I think they still have a bit of an issue of just being worse than regular fighters in that realm. So, like, regardless, there still needs to be another thing, right? But it's always more important to remember, anytime you are talking about balance, anytime you are being like, this ship's not balanced, this ship is balanced, is it's not about realism, it's about gameplay. Balance has nothing to do with realism. So with that said, the Ares should still be more powerful than it is, 100%. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But I don't think it should ever be able to kill... Sorry, I don't think it should never be able to kill small fighters. I don't think it should have like a strong capability to kill small fighters. And we're going to see, probably, we're going to see a big change with a lot of these fighter balance stuff with the slower kill times that they're going to try to balance stuff with. It's going to be very interesting. CitizenCon is going to be really interesting in terms of combat balance. Because we're either going to be told a lot or we're going to be told literally nothing. So make sure to watch CitizenCon with me on CitizenCon Day. Tweak down its turn rate and stuff and up its punching value. Yeah. I think its punching value definitely, like, it needs to do more damage. And I think the fact that the cannon feels like a repeater is not necessarily a balance issue. That's a feel issue. It should feel like it shoots slower because it shoots like these heavy cannon shots. So that's a different issue. Yeah, so that's combat balance for the most part. I did like last year when we got 314, and we saw the sort of the buffs that any turrets got because of the capacitors when they got introduced. So that was good. I liked that a lot. It made it so that, you know, at the very least, like a Hurricane is usually better. Usually, not all the time, but it's usually better than like 2 light fighters. So that made that sort of stuff better. And that's the better part of balance, is at least making it where, hey, at least these roles have a way to fight these other roles in like their intended way. But I think they've still got a long way to go with that. Like, is there really any point 9 times out of 10 to fully crew a Hammerhead versus like 8 light fighters? Or better yet, 8 Centurions on top of a 890J? But we also haven't had many instances of that combat being relevant yet as well. So yeah, that's basically the thing. No use to balance anything really until there is armor. I disagree, sort of. So, like, obviously, yeah, you don't do large balance changes until you've got the majority of the stuff that's affecting ships in the game. But you still need to balance the game right now to make it enjoyable enough to test. You know? Like, because they are listening to they try to listen to the community. Whether they're successful listening to the community is a different thing, but regardless, they are trying to listen to the community during releases of new ships and stuff, and you need the game to be somewhat balanced in order for that to happen. One big thing that happened was the Scorpius. So Scorpius came out, it was a banger, right? Scorpius was an absolute banger of a ship when it first came out, and there was lots of people saying this is too maneuverable, and a large amount of people as well saying no, like, it's fine, keep it where it is, it's fine. And they ended up not really changing it that much at all. I think it got a very, very slight turn rate decrease, but not real much. Not enough to be noticeable. And the ship's been fine since then. It doesn't get used much because most people aren't really multi-crewing heavy fighters right now, but it stayed fine, and it stayed pretty enjoyable to the point that people still want to use Scorpiuses every now and then. What are your thoughts on racing ship balance at this stage in the game? The racing community is extremely small. I love the racing community, and I love being a part of it. And it's probably the most dedicated community in Star Citizen, but it is way, 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 way smaller than you think. So while it's really cool, and I love that they've put in the new racing features, I don't think you do much racing balance for a while. It's just not necessary, I don't think. Not worth the time, where you can balance some other things instead. Makes Daymar Rally and other events into gambling activities for earning money in game. Damn right. So yeah, that's combat balance. I don't know if there's much real else to talk about combat balance, because it really is just like, yeah, I would like them to change small things. I don't think they have to change a lot of stuff, you know? It's not super required. I'm a Lost Soul. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. They sell ships with flight ready with an indicative performance level, even if it's work in progress. It's a big problem if you undone that every time after a sale. But they haven't undone that every time after a sale. Like I just used the example of the Scorpius, right? They do have a history of doing it. So it was done with the Redeemer, but I would still argue that the Redeemer didn't really lose anything. Like it lost some turret turn speed and everyone lost their mind, and then it's still an insanely powerful gunship, you know? But I don't think it's a malicious thing. I don't think they're selling those ships with like super high capabilities. I think they're selling those ships at the same time as they're releasing them, so they're inevitably going to get nerfed. I guess it's weird because we haven't seen many new ships get buffed. And so it could be an interesting development thing. Release a ship underpowered for sale and then buff it and see what happens. That'd be interesting. Look at that beard. Come on, what's the secret to such a luxurious beard? So the beard balancing called being lazy and just not shaving your beard. Do we have anything else to talk about? Combat balancing. Otherwise, we'll move on to some other stuff. Specifically, ship combat balancing. Has there been any small single-seater fighters released in the last year? The Talon? When was the Talon? No, the Talons were the year before. I think the Talons are the most recent of light fighters. And they did get nerfed, but I don't remember how. But then 3.14 came out and completely changed how they work anyway. Like, light fighters were the most affected probably by that system. What's all this about CIG wanting to make combat less jousting? Well, it's just not fun. So jousting, for those who are unaware, anytime you're in a combat fight and you have person A, person B, and they're literally just ramming at each other and then strafing around each other at the end, and then they turn around and they come back. It's a very noob effective way of flying, which means everyone's doing it. And so CIG obviously want to avoid that because it's just not fun. Because I even do it in PvE. I will joust the PvE NPCs because they can't deal with that. Jousting is really good in PvE. So they're trying to change the model of the system so it actually feels a bit more like a dogfight. It's just boring gameplay. That's all. And I am all for them fixing up stuff and making it less boring. You know? The Retaliator needs to fly better. I disagree with that. I think the Retaliator flies fine for what it is. It has a bunch of size 9 torps. It has a bunch of, what do you call them? A bunch of turrets. I don't think it's bad, but it's also a vehicle that I think doesn't get tested enough outside of like Xenothreat. Because when are you going to use it outside Xenothreat? Same as Hammerhead. I would like to have more situations where these vehicles are a bit more relevant. Maybe having stuff, and this sort of goes into mission balance, maybe having stuff like the Idris missions that exist, or even just like multiple Hammerhead missions and stuff, make those just worth a bit more money. Make it so that I am more inclined to do a full person Hammerhead for this mission that's going to give me 700k. Right? Because then we're going to split that. It's going to take us 40 minutes maybe to do the mission, like let's say. But the really high-end missions don't balance well that way. The really high-end missions are only profitable if you're solo. There's not enough multiplayer missions, really. And I think especially now that we have 100-player server caps, or like 125 sometimes, you'd think that'd happen more often too. Because we have so many more people in the server that making parties is much easier now. You know, people are sometimes just bored and you're like, hey, we've got an Idris mission, and maybe it's, you know, more than just an Idris. Maybe it's an Idris, a couple of Hammerheads, and some sort of like starter mission section. I think that'd be nice. I think a lot of like space missions have had a long time of getting like no content. Other than like the Reclaimer missions don't feel like a space fighter mission. Give us something that's got maybe ship waves. That's like a regular type of mission. Even if it's like one of those ones where it's like you have to have top rep with old mate from Hurston. But like, yeah, here's like 3 waves. First one is 3 hammerheads. Second one is 3 hammerheads. Last one is an Idris plus a couple of hammerheads or something. Give me more reason to use those vehicles like now. And from what I can tell, those sort of missions aren't coming out soon. So I think there is a real need for balance, just in terms of we need more missions for multi-crew in general. That'd be nice. Yeah. Use the hammerhead a lot on Trip's stream. That's where a lot of my money went when I logged on and got that 3 mil. Yeah, like you can use a lot for fun, but you want, like we were mentioning earlier in the stream before we started Comlink today, the vast majority of players, or at least a large vocal part of the player base, really does only play for monetary value. So you need to entice them to do stuff for money, otherwise they're not going to do it. So you're going to do it for solo, because it's going to be the most efficient way for them to get money fast. Yeah. CRGB like, what about AC? I don't know if I like this gin and grape mother. I'm fine if they want to balance new ships and turn them down. I just need more info on how they did the balancing. As to me, it seems like they're doing 1 small fighter versus 1 large multi-crew ship. Sure. Well, just, yeah, I think a lot of the new missions we've had in the last, like, 2 years has been, what do you call it? It's been, like, ground-based. Apart from dynamic events. It's felt like everything's been ground-based. Which is not a problem, necessarily, but it'd be nice to have a larger variety of new missions. What are my thoughts on the Polaris? I have no thoughts on the Polaris because I always confuse the Polaris and the Perseus every time without fail. One of them is a torpedo boat. The other one has a bunch of size 7s. That's all I know. I always forget which one's which. Don't know if you mentioned it already, but the A2 can one-shot every ship except the 890J. I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I think it is interesting to have a vehicle that does like a one-shot. But I don't think that the way to fix any issues people have with the A2 is to make the bombs less powerful. I think it's more interesting to have them, like it's more interesting gameplay for everyone to have them either easier to counter or to have another ship that isn't the A2 that is also like a tier 0 pick. Because then it's not a tier 0 pick, you know? Like have another ship that does something similar to the A2. Because otherwise, right now, like I said, everyone's bringing an A2 to Jumptown, or you're bringing nothing but counters to A2s. That's boring. It's not necessarily that one's more powerful than the other. It's just boring. No. Yeah. Make the bombs slower. Yeah, like making the bombs slower could be interesting. Can they reintroduce weapons outside of repeaters? We have high alpha weapons with the slower combat. The Corsair is coming with a ridiculous amount of pilot-controlled weapons. What do you mean introduce weapons outside of repeaters? We know that they're working on a couple of different weapon types, but I assume repeaters and cannons will still be with that. Radars from size X up to should receive a 1-screen alarm of a nuke nearby. That'd be interesting. Having a warning would be really interesting. I don't think it would be a bad thing. And I also don't think it would really nerf anything. It'd just be kind of cool, honestly. It'd just be kind of cool for it to be like, get a red alert above where it just says like, active mob, because it's not Moab in Star Citizen, but like active mob, like in vicinity or something. And everyone just panic and run. That'd be really, really cool. A2 being meta for JT is just conflict weapon escalation. Sure, but like that's boring once again. I have nothing against the A2, and I actually really like the idea of the A2, but it being tier 0 for ships to bring to the thing is, yeah, it's boring. In the same way that until the Redeemer came out, the Hammerhead was tier 0 for every Xenothreat, like, party, you know? Now you have the Redeemer, so you have a couple of other options of, like, you know, lots of firepower coming out, but, yeah. Because people would crew up a Hammerhead with, like, 3 people, and that would be enough firepower. Panic and run or stay and fight. So, yes, that's combat. Combat balancing is obviously going to be the one that's going to affect everyone, because everyone's going to be involved in combat one way or the other somehow. And I think the largest issue with combat balancing is there are so many changes to it coming. There have been so many changes in the past. 3.14 wasn't, like, completely changed everything, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. CitizenCon is going to be a big eye-opener on whether or not CRG actually do have a proper map going forward of what they want to do with combat balancing. And it's only a couple of weeks away, so at least we don't have to wait long to find out if there is news or no news about that. But they've got some talks about it, so yeah. Now, there is way more balancing involved in games than just combat and, like, you know, ship maneuverability. Some of the largest things we have is also trade. And I'll sort of put mining in with it too. So Cargo Refactor is coming out, and that's going to affect, well, trade a ton. Assuming it successfully comes out. I'm sure we'll find out in a couple of weeks whether that's gotten pushed or not. The biggest thing with trade right now, and we've even proven it today, is there's kind of only one run that's worth doing at all. And trade, by its definition, is like just a money-focused goal. It's just money. I just want to make money, right? We talk a little bit about risk and reward as well. Right now, currently in the game, it is somewhat risky to do trade, but you'll usually make your money back from your initial investment after like 3 trade runs, and then technically it's all profit over time after that. But we still have the issue of, you know, people losing their cargo for like 170k profit. They'll lose they'll lose like 400 to 500k worth of, well, money because they're trying to get 120k or whatever profit. Now, in the future, I think that's fine. I don't think there's necessarily an issue with that. Trade should technically eventually be one of the least risky things to do. But it also should scale a lot. So if you're doing trade in a place like Stanton, there's some pirates you should have to worry about, and that's your risk. Figure out your risk versus reward there. If you're doing trade through Pyro, extremely high risk, make sure your risk versus reward works there. And I think dynamic economy is the thing that's going to affect that the most. So there's a lot to be considered about whether CRG should balance trade at all until dynamic economy comes out, because it's going to be it's an extremely vastly different beast. But then we also have, with 3.18, we're going to see a much larger percentage of people doing actual piracy. And that's going to be really interesting. The balance changes that are going to happen with trade and actual piracy is mostly going to depend on exactly how Cargo Refactor works. Because right now it's extremely non-risky to be a pirate. We've talked about this with episode -1 and episode 0. Being a pirate is basically no risk. So yeah, I don't know how you balance those correctly. It's going to be really interesting with Cargo Refactor, because I also expect they're going to make trade a lot more profitable in general with 3.18, because you want people to test the Cargo Refactor. Like, that's what you do. They've done it before. They just go, hey, we want people to test this. So we've made it much more profitable. As well as exactly what you're saying, Aimless, with loading and unloading times, you also want to add a little bit of profit to that as well. As Concord to balance piracy. Hey, look, if they just bring Eve Concord, I'll be down. Just do it. Just copy it. And then mining balance. So I've talked about mining balance a lot of times because it's not, and it hasn't been for a really long time. It basically hasn't been balanced since Quantanium came out in any way. So back in the old day, even when the mole first came out for like, I think it was like 3 months after the mole first came out, it was pretty balanced. You didn't have refineries in game, so you were just selling raw ore. You weren't forced to go for just Quantanium. You used to have a system of, hey, you would go for Agricium or better, certain percentages. Having multiple lasers was relevant. It wasn't all Lancets and Surges, right? And we're now gotten to a point where it is only really worth to run multiple Prospectors with Lancets, with Surges, go. Now, obviously, I've said before, I still enjoy having fun. So I will still mole run because I find that a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite ships. It's my favorite ship in game at the very least. But that only takes you so far. And mining, while it's gotten a lot of feature updates, hasn't gotten a balance pass in a really, really long time. So we've just been doing the same thing over and over and over again. We got the mining gadgets, which I originally thought might actually change things up a bit, because you would now have configurations of lasers that with certain mining gadgets might be better for you than just Lancet and Surge. But it ended up not being the case. It's still just Lancet, Surge on a Prospector every day of the week. Unless you're first learning, then it might change. But we're talking about balance, right? So we've talked before, mining, we need bigger rocks, or harder to crack rocks at the very least. There really are red monster. They just don't need to exist. I think they were an amazing idea, but because regular mining didn't need a buff, they're pointless, you know? So yeah, we need larger rocks, or we need more difficult to crack rocks, or we need to make things that aren't Quantanium more profitable. Because, yeah, otherwise it's just pointless. It takes longer to deploy and retrieve than it does to harvest the rock with the right equipment. Yeah, they are pointless right now. So, I mean, yeah, like there's not really much to talk about with mining. It's just, I don't think anyone disagrees that mining is broken in terms of there is a tier 0 way to do mining, and that's it, it's done. There's also, like, location-wise, it's kind of boring too, because right now, 9 times out of 10, you're either mining in the belt or Lyria. And there's, like, nowhere else. I would really love it if we could go back to the days where, what are they called? Cleo and Calliope were, like, really, really good Quantanium deposits, but it was much harder to fly around there. I think it still is, but it doesn't have the easy-to-scan bonus that Lyria does. Don't forget Aberdeen for ROC miners. I don't think there's much in terms of balancing ROCs, but like location-wise, again, would be nice. Just having other locations to do it. And that might happen when we get Pyro, but Pyro's still a long way out. So it'd be nice to get something now. Yeah. There's also, I have mentioned before, they did tease in the big Tony Z video from last year, they did sort of tease a dynamic event called Gold Rush, where basically someone would find just a stupid amount of gold in one location, and then all of the NPCs and all the players would come and get that gold. Because if you were finding like large rocks that were 100% gold, that'd probably be profitable enough because you're going through it so quick. But that doesn't exist right now, you know? If you want to go mine gold right now, you're still looking for like 25% or better, and that they're rare, you know what I mean? So I do remember that Liberator, and I would like those back. They were very cool. If they let the rock hover up ores, maybe the mining gadgets would see more use. Once again, I think the mining gadgets are a good idea in general, and I think they would work great right now if it wasn't just, let's chuck a Lancet on a Prospector with a Surge, we're done. Like, that's it. We need rocks that are better for multi-crew gameplay. And I think that's a lot of the balancing stuff that I'm going to talk about today is multi-crew related. Because there's not really much incentive outside of fun. And fun's obviously a good incentive, but for a lot of people, it's not enough incentive. There's not enough incentive to do that multi-crew gameplay because it's not profitable enough. Mining could also be harder if you use GPR. Then mining would bring in the load, but you wouldn't know the grade of material you haul in. So basically, you could get 10 to 100% yield of ore, but you also get a ton of rock or other material before you get to station if mining in the wrong way. Maybe, I think that's sort of like a reimagining of how mining works, though, and I don't think that's necessary. It'd be cool, but I think fixing it in other ways is better, because I do like the concept of the mining system as it stands right now. I think it's pretty cool, but yeah, just needs a bit of balancing. Mining gadgets are for rented mining ships where the mining head cannot be changed, but that's such a small portion of the gameplay experience, because you only rent a prospector for like a week maximum, and then you're never using mining gadgets again. You know, like you're never using this big mechanic that does a lot. Like mining gadgets are a very well thought out mechanic for the most part in terms of what they actually do. They just do nothing in the meta. Best mining on Volcano Planet could wreck the engine. That'd be cool. Take some casual damage while you're in one of the Pyro Volcano Planet. Yeah, and then that goes into as well. So yeah, they're like selling, like the fact that Quantanium is the only thing worth mining for your time. I would hope and expect that eventually, when we actually want to use these items, that we will want the cheaper materials, like we will want a lot of the cheaper materials, and that it would be worth our time to do it. Like in EVE Online, I think it's called Tritanium. That might be the refined material, but whatever it is that gives you Tritanium is the most common like material in the game. But just because it's super, super common and super, super low tier, what that actually means is that when you're constructing anything, you need a boatload of it. So it never becomes worthless. It is worth less than the other materials, but it's never worthless. And you'll have moments where it will still be more profitable for you to put the time in to mine that material than buy it. Most of the time. Obviously that's a thing that a player will determine. So yeah. So yeah, touching on a thing as well, like Execute was talking about, because the last 2 episodes were all about PvP. The crime stat system is getting a little bit of a rebalancing. So CS1 and CS2s, you're no longer going to be getting shot at and are just fines. That is fantastic. I think that is great. And it is as it should be. And I hope that it doesn't change, honestly, because I think that's a really, really good idea. Unless maybe you've got a crime stat with a organization that's incredibly hard ass, but I think that's way in the future. So the whole security point Korea, the whole you won't be able to hack your crime stat anywhere else, don't think is going to be as bad as we originally thought. So it's very, very good to see that. That is a rebalancing. It's a rebalancing that's happening right now that is better for the game as it is. And this is why, sort of as we're talking, balancing the game right now is relevant. It matters. People are playing the game right now, and I think that's important to remember. So, yeah. What else needs to be balanced? Everything. Needing jamming ships to remove the crime recording when pirating, so you need a jammer ship extra to help you. Like a hacking ship? Because, yeah, maybe. Hacking ships could be relevant and that sort of stuff. I think that's another big future thing. Although I would be interested to see, like... So in 3 weeks' time, when the game is finally released, how would you like to see the game balanced? Would you like to see it be like live service balanced, as in like you'll get a hot fix once every day, every 2 days, whatever, where something gets fixed really, really quickly? Or would you like to see it be a patch of stuff? Like a big thing that happens in Magic the Gathering, which is the thing that I know the most about in terms of balancing. Obviously, they will leave decks to, like, tier 0 decks, tier 1 decks to survive for at least 3 months most of the time until a new banning happens or whatever. And I don't think that's a terrible way to do it, because there is no way CRG can avoid meta. You can spread the meta, but it's literally impossible to avoid meta because it's a video game. It is a game. That's gonna happen. Yeah, would you want those fixes to happen like immediately, or like give it some time? Because you also get into the problem if they start fixing them like literally every day, people will build towards a meta and then get really, really mad when things change super quickly on them because they've just lost all that UEC. Perfect balance kills a meta. We are nowhere near balance right now. No, 100%. This is now talking about future. Red Monster. But yeah, you're never gonna avoid meta. Literally impossible. Find me any game that doesn't have a meta. Can't perfectly balance anything. A single player can't be balanced against a crew. Yeah, exactly. Once a month hotfix update. I think it's the best way to do it. Just have a look at stuff and evaluate. It'd be nice as well. Like, obviously they have testers and stuff, but some other games have done things where they have like a dedicated like balanced team, in that it's a group of people that when new features are coming out, they will just test balance and then change things accordingly. And it literally ranges from extremely casual players to extremely professional players, so that you do have that large range of people to, well, balance off of. Because if you have 2 pro players that are saying this thing needs to change 100%, but the casual players are saying, yeah, like this never comes up, not relevant unless you've got literally the best aim in the world, well, obviously that gets balanced differently. Because you want it to be balanced differently, because it's going to affect those people differently. Having stealth could even the odds, though, with single player versus a group. A single player ship in a tiny ship could sneak past anyone, I think, if in stealth mode. Stealth is one thing that also really needs a balance, I think. Like, right now. The stealth ships just don't stealth. They don't stealth the way that I would like them to, at the very least, maybe. Big update, new features, content 1 to 2 times a quarter. Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. Vulcan, will it really improve our FPS? Right now, even with an RTX 2070, you can't get past 40 FPS. 3070. Firstly, I disagree. You can definitely get past 40 FPS, but yeah, I think it will improve FPS like more than you realize, because the FPS has been increasing a lot recently. You guys remember what, other than Orison, do you guys remember what the FPS was like a year ago? It's like 50% better for everyone right now. I think a lot of people forget the 316 and 317 pushed FPS a lot in most places for most systems. So yeah, I think Vulcan and Gen 12 is doing a lot for that. They also are talking on CitizenCon about that sort of stuff. There is a panel for it. So, or just not a panel, like a presentation. So we'll obviously learn a bit more about that as well. Nice last speaker. I should keep that in mind. Can't use rock, paper, scissors, or the X can't kill Y without enforcing a meta. Might work for games like Eve, but Pilot Skill is a much bigger factor in SC. 100% it is, but it's still, there is going to be a rock, paper, scissors meta regardless. Or at the very least, like a rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. Right? Always is. Question is, how many ships, because it's usually irrelevant in combat, more than anything, is how many combat ships do you want to be relevant within a system? Because you're going to always end up with a point where there's going to be one best ship and one worst ship. Would love to see collision balance for ship-to-ship slight impacts. Large races can be a death trap. I think a lot of that is going to come with armor, because right now, well, ships are currently exploding more often than they will in the future, but we're also still so far away from that as well, as we just continue to be so far away from these things that are supposed to, you know, save certain aspects of the game. But yeah, my understanding is armor should change how that works. I did gel pad all my GPUs. You can find the thickness needed of pads from water block install vids for the card and just use the stock cooler block instead. I mean, I don't have a water block, but fair. I'm just a chump air cooler. That's one thing, actually. So a lot of other games, and honestly the biggest example is Fortnite, have a real big discrepancy in PvP balance when it comes to computer performance. In that the worse your computer performs, the better you can perform. I feel like that could happen with StarCid as well, but it'll probably only happen FPS-wise. Things like shrubberies and trees and whatnot in games like Fortnite or like PUBG, it used to happen to a lot with too. The lower settings you have, the less of those things that would spawn. And I haven't tried in StarCid do this for a while, but I assume it is the same case. So that's interesting. Balance needed in StarCid is an enemy shooting through mountains at the moment? Nah, perfectly balanced. Bugs should also always be the priority over balance, 100%. Because it is not the same teams, but they do sort of work on similar projects. The guys that fix a lot of the bugs and the guys that do stuff like balance. Because sometimes they go hand in hand. But yeah, always bug preference, always bug preference. Let's move the PvP slider. I hate the term slider. It's clearly a button, not a slider. I refuse. Turns PvP off balance, sort of. I don't know if there's any other major things to consider with balance in StarCid. Other than just make it so that all professions are able to be balanced one way or another, risk reward. And they also don't have to be perfectly balanced. They just have to be close. Because people will still always gravitate to the one that they find the most fun, as long as it's making enough money for their effort. Because otherwise you'll end up in a situation where why bother ever doing delivery missions? Which is like literally the case right now. Unless you're a brand new player, why ever bother doing delivery missions? So that's going to be a hard one to do. Especially because you have the pirate profession is always going to be connected to the mining and the cargo professions. And so any balance change to any of those three is going to affect the other two. You know? I turned Ubisoft grinding off. The entire game is now balanced perfectly. I feel like that's the thing though, you have to have something for new restarting players. Sure, but in essence, I think you understand what I mean though, right? Like, if someone really, really enjoys doing those missions, there needs to be a reason for them to continue doing it monetarily wise. Otherwise, there's not much point in having those missions at all. What ship should we vote for now for the showdown? Right now, you should vote for the Pisces. And for the next hour, you should vote for the Pisces. Restore the Ares and balance is restored. The A2 is counted and all is well with the verse. That actually is an interesting one. If the Ares had if it did have a bigger punch right now, that would make the A2 really interesting for Jumptown. Really, really interesting. Oh no, tell you what. This is what you do, Aimless. Like, you still buff the Ares, whatever, but you have a third Ares called... What, you've got the Ion, you've got the Inferno. Call it the Ares Indigo, because it has to start with an I, and give it a distortion. Give it a size 7 distortion cannon. Imagine. Imagine a size 7 distortion cannon. A2 shouldn't really be a match for even a Merlin, though. Anything tiny should wreck an A2. Yeah, but the A2 should have the survivability to last long enough that, like, someone else can come wreck the Merlin. And I think that is correct. How do you balance the Corsair? Well, it's not out yet, so we'll see. We'll see. Though I think a good option for any time we have ships that have a lot of pilot guns and have a lot of power, and we want them to become less powerful, is don't necessarily mess with the guns, mess with the maneuverability. And that'll impact it a lot. Especially if you do want to focus on making Star Citizen a, like, more of a skill-based game. Because that's the thing as well. You can either go skill or you can go like just making those ships better. Making multi-crew better. I think you try to do both, but you want skill, I think, like, to prevail. Bombers in any fight are fragile in history overall. Oh, for sure. And I think all of the Hercules, honestly, have a little bit too good maneuverability. Like, it should be less, regardless. But once again, sort of talking in the A2 balancing, does it really need balancing right now? Maybe not. Would it be worth their time to do a small bit of balancing? Maybe. Maybe it would. Maybe it would make the A2 more entertaining and more fun. Sometimes nerfing ships makes everything more fun. Oh, thank you, Cranky Old Man. I'll have a look at that later. So yeah, unless there's a different section of balance you guys want to talk about, that might be it for the first official comlink. Oh, I might have gone through that one already, Carolinga. From Carolinga. But I'll check it, yeah. We've talked professions, we've talked combat. Oh, I will say ground combat. It'd be nice if they, like, messed around a bit more with the guns in terms of balancing, but I don't know. Once again, I don't think it's a thing that needs to happen. It'd just be nice. Because right now, I'm just going to use my favorite gun and not use any shotguns. And that's it. Big ships with big enough engines or thrusters should be able to move well. I don't think they should be able to have, like, a good rotational speed or anything, though, because they are still thick. Want to see how mine layers work? 100%. Alrighty, well, it was a little under an hour, but I think we're going to end that there for the very first official comlink, where we discussed a bunch of balance. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to follow me on Twitch if you're looking at the YouTube version of comlink. You can find me over at twitch.tv/Croncy, where we're doing comlink every single Monday. And there'll be a new conversation every week, and you guys can be a part of the conversation, so we can, we can have a chat. Next week's conversation, I think, is going to be about what we were originally going to do this one about, which was missions. We're going to be talking all about missions. And one of the big things that I'm going to be talking about next week is story missions. I really, really want story missions in Star Citizen. Because, or more like now. I want story missions in Star Citizen now. Because they exist in every MMO that exists, except for Star Citizen. I know Squadron 42 exists, don't care. I want story missions. Or more relevant missions. I want them soon. So yeah, that's where we're going to end it. The stream isn't ending, though. We're going to continue in a second, as well as